thank you so much for listening to my podcast today. Today, I'm here with Melissa Paoloni, who is an inspiring woman in the field of biotechnology. She is currently the COO of OncoNano Medicine. Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak with us today.
Thanks, first of all, thanks for having me, Sadie. Really excited to be here and share with your listeners and anyone else, especially younger folks who are interested in biotech and medicine and science. It's a really exciting path and career that I'm sure during our chat will be evident that's always changing, which makes it even more fun. So
Yes.
I am, as you noted, the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President of OncoNano Medicine. We are a private biotech that's based in Dallas, Texas, although I live here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we have a proprietary technology. I'm going to get sciencey for a second. It's a polymeric mycel, which is basically a fancy name for a polymer, which is, a strip that allows you to bind a variety of different payloads. Think of it that once we bind a payload, and those payloads are a variety of anti-cancer agents, so they're actually, what would go in and kill the cancer cell, then internally in the body, that polymer forms a mycel, which is a bubble, and then that payload sits inside. So it traverses through the bloodstream. It goes uniquely to tumors because we are an oncology biotech, where the pH or the acidic environment in the tumor, which is unique to anywhere in the body, allows it to open up and release the payload. So basically, it's a specific targeting technology that brings a variety of anti-cancer medicines directly to tumors, sparing normal tissues and normal parts of the body. So what we're hoping to do with this type of delivery mechanism is better target cancer and limit side effects that are, both deleterious or uncomfortable or toxic to patients. So improve upon efficacy by going directly to tumors and limiting some of the toxicity we see with a variety of anti-cancer agents.
Wow, that is fascinating. Very interesting. And do you have any ongoing clinical trials happening right now?
We do. We have an ongoing clinical trial. We have our first clinical asset that is in this space utilizing our polymer technology. It is
Mhm.
what we call a dual activating STING agonist, which is basically, again, the payload is the natural activator for STING, which is a pathway in the body important for
Mhm.
immune activation. So the polymer carries that payload, it releases it in the tumor, then that pathway is activated and that turns on the immune system through a variety of different arms or mechanisms to attack the cancer cells. So it's what they call immunotherapy, which may be a
Mhm.
term you're used to and have heard before.
Yes,
And
definitely.
we hope that by doing so, it can uniquely, again, target the tumor. This particular target hasn't been able to been successfully delivered through a variety of other mechanisms, which is basically saying the other clinical assets in this space haven't
Mhm.
worked well because generally speaking, they've been too toxic. But we're hopeful that again, by our mechanism, that we can help limit that toxicity, which then allows the efficacy to shine through. And because we're in phase 1, which is the earliest stage of clinical development, we're just defining the right dose in patients when given alone, and then given in combination with another immunotherapy that's already approved by a company called Regeneron. That drug is called Libtayo, and it's a PD-1 inhibitor. So they will be given together to see if we can use that combination approach to be most potentially efficacious for patients.
Wow, this is so interesting. I'm learning so many new things. And is Ongo Nano a new company or has it been recently founded?
That's a great question. It's actually, we've been in existence since 2014, although
Oh, okay.
that was an early birth of the technology itself was developed by two professors who are our scientific co-founders at University of Texas Southwestern, which is a
Mhm.
very large cancer hospital and, well, large hospital period, but specific emphasis for their work is in cancer in the Dallas area. So one is One is a molecular chemist, the other is a surgeon. So they first developed the technology, and this is kind of a fun story. But instead of putting as I was talking about before, a payload or something that kills tumor cells, instead they put a fluorescence signal, or basically something that would light up. So it works through the same mechanism. It was delivered systemically, and the idea that it would go to the areas of the tumor and light up there. And it was because one of them is a surgeon, he wanted to utilize that technology to be able to identify specific areas of cancer that you either can't see with the naked eye, or
Mhm.
can't see through regular imaging that you would have done prior to, a big surgical procedure to remove a tumor. So it can help identify what they call occult metastasis, which is small areas of cancer that are hard to see and recognize, as well as help identify for the surgeon what the margins, meaning the area that they should excise of a primary tumor. So the original technology was actually invented to help in surgical procedures. And we've now taken that technology and developed it to put a variety of different things inside that can utilize the same mechanism, but instead now kill cancer cells, if that makes sense.
Yes, that definitely makes sense. That's a great evolution and a good story of how it began. And can you tell us about your academic and research background that led to your job at OncoNano and how you got involved?
Sure. That's I always tease that that's a good party story because it's an interesting journey. I think I have a unique path. I have a rather traditional academic path. I, was certainly a very motivated student. I did my undergraduate work at Stanford University, right here in the Bay Area. I was a hum bio major, which is Stanford lingo for human biology,
Okay.
which is one of the disciplines. Stanford has two different majors in biology, but hum bio was unique because you have to pick both a scientific focus as well as a social science focus. So you learn about things in a more holistic way,
Yeah.
which is, I think, a good testament to the way that I like to learn. So I actually had always wanted for my whole life to be a veterinarian. I think I was the little 6-year-old who said, I want to be a vet when I grow up. And I followed that path and went on to get my doctor of veterinary medicine at Tufts University. And in doing so, I always knew that I wanted to specialize in veterinary medicine. So, in vet medicine, just like in human medicine, you can be a regular vet where you see everything, where you may normally bring your dog and cat, or you can
Mhm.
do a residency where you then could be a cardiologist or an orthopedic surgeon or a neurologist. And I decided to do mine in medical oncology. So I went on to do that specialty to learn about the ins and outs of cancer biology and how to treat it. And I did that at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Wisconsin. And then I really loved during that time having the opportunity to explore some basic science. So, my third year of residency, after I fulfilled a number of my clinical duties, I basically spent almost an entire year in the lab working under the guidance and tutelage of one of my resident advisors, and really found a love for benchtop science. So, again, studying more of some of the ways that we can first understand cancer better and then hence develop better treatments for it. So, with that in mind, I decided to do a postdoc fellowship. And I did so and applied to do one at the National Cancer Institute. So, the National Cancer Institute is at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. It's the largest government research arm, I think, in the world, if I hopefully correct with that fact. And there I did some more basic science work for about 2 years in genomics, and then went on to actually go back to doing drug development work. I was a staff clinician and scientist there for over 10 years, and I did a lot of early drug development work. And that was the first time really that I moved over to building consortia and partnerships. So the real essence of my job is I worked with drug companies from around the world who are interested in collaborating with scientists at the NCI to do both basic science work and clinical trial work. So I would build those research collaborations really from the ground up, both, the hypothesis that we wish to study, what we would actually engender upon to do, help design the clinical trial, and then conduct the clinical trial and oversee it for the drug company that we were partnering with. So that was
Mhm.
really how I transitioned my career into the drug development space and had the opportunity to work with large pharma, small, tiny biotech, and everywhere in between, certainly because the resources, both clinically and then certainly the basic science powerhouse that the NCI is, really made it an attractive partner to work with.
Mhm.
So I think it was there that I really honed my partnering skills, my first foray in how to manage those types of relationships, those collaborations or alliances, and then certainly my clinical trial and drug development acumen. From there, I actually moved back here to to San Francisco and worked at UCSF for a number of years. So there I worked within the breast oncology program and ran a very large research collaboration called the I-SPY program. It was a really innovative clinical trial in breast cancer in which we were looking for novel treatments. The main interesting part of that trial, beyond how we would select the different arms that we would let patients potentially have different treatments, is that it was actually working with a variety of different drug companies. So that it in itself was something called a public-private partnership, and it was my job to work with the various pharmaceutical companies to build those collaborations to have us test their drugs. So you're getting to the theme here. That I spent a good 10 to 15 years of my first initially clinical career and then onward in the business development and alliance management space. So building relationships, building collaborations, and then making them work, spending the time to ensure that they were successful in meeting their objectives and goals. From there,
Yes.
I spent some time in consulting where I worked with a variety of entities, both mostly pharmaceutical companies, helping to build innovative type of research trials, as well as helping them better figure out operational efficiencies, corporate strategy to be effective, mostly in the partnering space.
Mhm.
So with that jump, I then moved into the biotech space, specifically with Arcus Biosciences, which is a public company here in the Bay Area that's based in Hayward and also has a facility in Brisbane. And I led a variety of different functions for Arcus, corporate development, which is a fancy word for business development, alliance management, so managing all the partnerships that we built in the business development space, and then portfolio and project management, which is a nice way of saying making sure that things get done across the organization. From there, I left Arcus just at the end of last year and moved into the private biotech space with OncoNano, which had me have the opportunity to ascend into the chief operating officer role. So that was a very long answer to say I've spent a lot of time, and I would say the essence of my career initially as a clinician scientist. That's really the basis of me wanting to make a difference for patients and understanding the work that we do, and then spending the last 20 years of my career building alliances to really help us get that work done most effectively, working collaboratively across a variety of different spheres and spectrums.
Wow, that is fascinating. You have done so much during your career and really, I guess, jumped around and grown a lot. And that is fascinating. I really appreciate hearing about it. And thank you also for defining what each of your titles and roles mean, because I know that's super helpful for me to know what everything means, what you're really doing when you have a title of, staff scientist or business development and what you're really doing in that position. How did you first become interested in conducting clinical trials, and why did you choose to go to the NIH?
I think the best reason for that is
Mm-hmm.
I call myself an oncophile, which is a fancy word for saying, oncology is my passion.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've all had someone in our life that has been touched by cancer, and I think
Yes.
it's meaningful to truly each and every person. I'm going to do a small story and then go back to your question.
Okay,
Um,
amazing.
we were watching the All-Star game. We're big baseball fans in my house,
Mm-hmm.
with my two children. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, and there was a moment to Stand Up to Cancer, which is a large nonprofit organization that helps fund research for in a very collaborative way. And they had everyone in the stadium who was attending the All-Star game stand up in a minute of silence and hold up a sign with the name of someone in their life has been touched by cancer. And truly, every single person in a stadium of 50,000 people had a unique sign. And I think it's a very moving moment to watch and remember that truly cancer is the leading cause of death in the United States, the second leading cause of death in the world. And for me, it is the only way that we can really make a difference is if we continue to try to push the envelopes of developing, understanding, and hence testing new medicines to help patients with cancer. And that's what clinical trials do, is they allow
Yes.
us to test and first ensure and understand if a drug is safe, then understand if a drug is effective, meaning it has the ability to actually kill cancer and improve patient lifespan? And then three, does it work better than what we have as the approved standard of care, meaning what patients with that disease are already receiving? So those are kind of the three different phases of a clinical trial that allow us to test and see if our medicine is effective in really making a difference in the lives of patients.
Wow, that is a powerful story. I can just imagine how that would feel, the moment of silence. And it's amazing the work that you do to help and, battle this disease that hurts so many people and really affects so many people's lives. And so you started more on the science side, being a scientist and, doing your residency and learning a lot about the science side. And how has that helped you while you're doing business development, consulting, and alliance management? And what unique perspective does that give you versus someone who learned more about the business side and did more school on the business side?
Yeah, super question. And my favorite one to answer. I think the opportunity to understand the science and actually understand how to conduct a clinical trial successfully allows me a level of understanding of the base operations of doing the work in a really
Hmm.
unique way. It allows you to understand how to talk to the stakeholders that are necessary in clinical trial work. So, stakeholders including patients. I was an active clinician to other physicians. So those are obviously the folks who are conducting the clinical trial on a day-to-day basis and seeing the patients that we're testing and treating with our new medicine. And then three, being able to really understand the data that emerges from those exercises
Yes.
in, I think, a critical way so that you can understand what that data tells you, and also, frankly, what it doesn't tell you. What are the potential liabilities and gaps in that data? Within all of those ecosystems of operations, you learn how to work together well with people, how to manage people with different backgrounds, strengths, viewpoints, and needs. And I think those sort of themes are what I have moved over in my career in business development and alliance management. First, in understanding as we first think about a new relationship, I don't call it a deal. It's a relationship.
Yes.
And in order to make a relationship work, it needs to work for both parties. So I think because I've always had that sort of background, you can think about, okay, what are my needs in putting together this new relationship? And what are the other parties' needs? And how do we
Mhm.
construct something that's beneficial or symbiotic to everybody? So in constructing a relationship that you think is going to work. And then two, the alliance management part is after we all say yay and sign it and say, congratulations, we've gotten that done. That's when the real work starts. That's when you
Yeah.
actually have to do the work. So I think that's really where my main skills lie. Again, I think I'm an expert doer. How do you organize something to get it done effectively? How do you manage, again, stakeholders in that environment, different roles, different functions, different needs? Again, I'm purposely saying the same things to make sure we can do the work effectively. And that's really what an alliance manager does. Um, there's an old saying, and it's not a veterinary saying, but it's about herding cats. That's a little bit what alliance management is.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
it's how to influence people without power, meaning
Wow.
how to get people to figure out the best way to collaborate, to align around a position or to align around a way to do something.
Mhm.
And really to take sometimes two different companies with very different size, needs, um, motivations, and figure out the best way to get the job done. So I think that practices the best aspects of my skill
Mhm.
set. And
Yeah.
that is what I think transcends all of the aspects of being a clinician scientist through being a business development, corporate development, and alliance management specialist. And now that I sort of sit in an overseeing operational role, to all of our companies' work. So, of course, corporate development, alliance management, portfolio program management fall under my tutelage. So now do investor relations, corporate communications, corporate strategy, and frankly, all of those buckets still utilize those same skill sets of trying to understand what somebody else needs and trying to present it to them in a way they can best understand it for us to get our work done.
Yes. Wow. And you must definitely bring a unique perspective as you've actually been in the other person's shoes for a lot of the alliances that you'll be forming. So that's fascinating and definitely super interesting. And I can imagine very valuable. And what challenges have you faced in your field?
Yeah, and frankly, the way our previous conversation, I think, is a good one in that
Yeah.
there are a number of folks who pursue a path, especially in business development or corporate development, who have a more base finance background.
Yeah.
So that wasn't my background.
Hmm.
I will admit it now publicly that I never took an economics class at Stanford.
Wow.
So
Okay.
because that wasn't my major and that wasn't
Yeah.
a requirement. I took calculus, so just to be clear, there was plenty of math,
Yes.
um, but a different sort of discipline. I certainly have thought at different parts of my life about getting an MBA, so a Master's of Business Administration. But with all of my other training, it seemed
Hmm.
kind of like a fool's errand at that point,
Hmm.
and had learned enough around basic deal structure, kind of the key economic drivers of the business, certainly macroeconomic factors that affect. Both being able to source capital as a private company in the venture capital space or to source capital in the public markets. Um, from osmosis over the years, that gave me enough of a base to kind of be able to fortify that. But I will admit, there's always a little level of uncertainty
Hmm.
that sort of sits without that clear background, and I think that just speaks to a bit to my personality. I'm a bit of a school geek, so academic credentialing means a lot to me.
Yes.
So I think for me, that was always a bit of an uncertainty. And, certainly there are different twists and turns of my career. Folks have asked me because, as I think I said at the top, I'm not a human physician. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm
Mhm.
a veterinary doctor of veterinary medicine. So they've asked me, what, do you wish that you had gone on to, be an MD? And
Yeah.
that doesn't matter at this point in my career. I don't think that had harbored any change. But because my path was less traditional, I think that is, many folks take a very vertical path in which you work for one company, or at least perhaps in the old days, you work for one
Mhm.
company, you kind of climb up the ranks. That wasn't my path. So it's a bit more of a traverse. And I think that gives me a real breadth of experience in a way that's more valuable. But in those ways, they could also be seen as potential challenges.
Yes, definitely. I think it's super interesting to hear about a path that isn't the classic path that I would hear of, and to see how you can traverse and where you will end up. And starting from vet to being chief operations officer, I think that's absolutely fascinating, and all the different places that you've been in between. And also shifting gears a little bit about just what it is like to be in your current role or any of the roles that you've had over time. But what does a typical workday look like for you, and how has that evolved over time?
It's a great question. I think I try to be in my current seat, especially, I try to use my time valuably,
Hmm.
meaning I think, many of us have calendars sometimes that are just chock full of meetings. And
Hmm.
sometimes a meeting can be a really effective way to get work done. Sometimes it's a really effective way to be able to sadly be having to do that same work at 8 o'clock at night after I put my children to bed. So, um, so I think for me, of course, I have meetings with different teams. I help organize all of our internal teams. So sometimes that might be, an executive meeting where we have to make a specific decision. Sometimes it might be that we're looking at data. We're in a project team meeting where we're analyzing different things, where we're making a more downstream decision. Sometimes it's, I think this week I'm already working on our board deck for our quarter 3 board meeting in
Wow.
September. So kind of organizing what our strategic thoughts, putting together a summary of the quarter as far as both our achievements and then certainly what we wish to accomplish through the end of the year, and being thoughtful to all of those things, timelines and budgets and those things that I'm responsible for. Um, and then, I try to make time to actually make sure I have some pockets to do some work. So that might be meeting with some of my reports or skips to better understand what their workflow has been for the week. If they're working on anything vexing, celebrating their accomplishments,
Mhm.
and doing, those touch bases that I also think are really important, not just in a leadership position, but just to make sure that I'm also really fluent on what the folks that are actually doing the majority of the day-to-day activities within our organization are up to. And that's been frankly the case. And then certainly sometimes it's external meetings, talking to investors, talking to collaborators, talking to analysts, and certainly getting the message out about our company, and certainly what we're hopeful to do and what our current set of accomplishments might be.
Wow, that's amazing. It's good to hear more about the your interactions with other people in your office and what that looks like, because that's obviously not necessarily part of the title or the part of the job description. And also, I know you have two kids, so how does your work and life balance, or what does that look like for you?
Well, thank you for asking about them, because it's my favorite thing to talk about. As I briefly mentioned before, I have an 8-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. I think, like most parents, they're the apple of my eye, or the light of my life. They're still my number one priority, but there are days when that work sometimes takes over. I think, like all things in life, and this is true for any working parent, you sometimes just balance the hottest potato or the biggest fire at the moment.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
sometimes that is okay. Who needs to pick up from, okay, it's time for camp pickups. It's summertime, so kids on two different sides of the city. And sometimes it's obviously a work-related priority. So you learn to prioritize. You learn to I try to leave work at work
Mhm.
when I'm with my family so that I can be really present and engaged. I think my daughter called me out last night at our bedtime snuggle for reading a work email
Oh.
and said, Mom, there's no work now. So, they keep me honest too,
Hmm.
but they're part of the why.
Yeah,
So and I think that they know that my work is meaningful. It's meaningful to me. It makes me
definitely.
feel good. It's impactful to the world, and I hope makes a difference. And that's certainly something we talk about as a family when they think about what careers they may wish to pursue one day.
Wow. Yes, that's very inspiring. And I have
Although
just
my
two more
son currently
questions.
wants to be like a shortstop, hopefully at least for the New York Yankees. So
Yeah, it's okay. We all have interesting, future career paths when we're below 10 years old.
yeah.
And then what has been the most rewarding part of your career?
Um, I think there's been so many aspects,
Mm,
certainly seeing data that you say, okay, this trial, this therapy really made a difference for patients.
hmm
Certainly collaborations that we've been able to put together that have been fruitful to either progress a program or do things that we wouldn't have been able to do by ourselves. Certainly interacting with colleagues. I think I'm at this stage of my career as well where I'm very thoughtful to mentoring and what my what I want my legacy, dare I use that word, to be, how I want to be thought of by the people that I've worked with. And I find those interactions really rewarding as well. So people seeing other people continue to meet their goals and exceed them and progress their careers. I'm really proud to have been a part of a number of, great accomplishments by the people I've worked with.
Wow, that's amazing. Definitely sounds very rewarding. And then I'm super inspired by your path. I think it's fascinating, and I like that you've traversed rather than taken that vertical, classic, or I guess classic, um, career path. And I just am wondering what piece of advice you have for other young women who would be interested in the field of biotechnology.
Mm. That's a great question too. Um, I always say explore the different aspects of if you think this space is interesting, figure out, do you like basic science? Do you like clinical science? Do you like more the business end? The sort of administrative end of the work, which obviously is raising money and, roles that I'm in today, operating roles. So you can pick out little parts to get experience in and see what intrigues you, what speaks to you, what you find interesting, what you could say, I could do this for the next 30 years. But then I will say, nobody ever does anything for the next 30 years anymore.
Yeah.
And no, I'm teasing. Certainly some people do, but I do think you're never set on a particular path. And I do think because my path is unique, I think I've counseled a lot of people about how do you make a successful career transition. It's often a lot more fluid than you think. It's a lot less than a 180,
Mhm.
but and how do you speak about things that you've done in the past that you can apply to an additional role? So my advice is never feel pigeonholed by a path that you've taken. That's an experience that it gives you that you can translate to doing something else. So, as cheesy as it sounds, find your passion. That takes time to look around. Two, follow it. And three, don't be afraid to veer from it if something else interests you or intrigues you, because we all evolve. And sometimes you find something else that you say, okay, this is where I'd like to grow now. And don't be afraid to do that and seek out folks that can help you, like these chats. Learn, um,
Yes,
learn from folks that have had different experiences, and say, how'd you do that? And never be afraid to ask for help.
that is so inspiring. I will definitely remember this advice. I really appreciate sharing all of your stories today. I will be thinking about this for quite some time. I find your path very unique. I find it very inspiring. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to share your experiences with us. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure. I wish you the best, and I look forward to seeing what great things you do.